Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We are on book 3, part 10 of The Law of One Raw Material. And we're going to have a bit of refresher before we start these next sessions. And it's mostly about time, space, and space-time. I get questions about what the difference is between those two. And in these next sessions, it is talked about quite a bit. So just a quick refresher here, because the questioners want to know about unmanifested beings and to get better clarity on that. So time, space, and space time. Let's look at space time. If you are going to take an assessment of where you are right now and take like a snapshot of where you are right now, and you think about the surroundings of where everything is, where the sun is, where the moon is, where all the planets are, where we are on the spiral of our galaxy. And when you go out further and further and further until you can actually snapshot the entire universe that we're in right now, that gives you space time, right? So it's like a tangible thing, and it only happens once. It doesn't matter how much you would speed up time or go back in time. You are never going to ever have the same configuration twice when you capture more and more of it. Like even if all the planets are in the same spot, there would be like a star that blew up and is no longer there anymore or something like that, right? So space-time only happens once. It's that particular space at that particular time, right? So when you talk about space-time, you can always find exactly where it is because it's only once and it's a very real place, right? So when we talk about time-space, or the way, Ra is talking about time-space, it is when you are outside of your body, like your higher self, up in the higher dimensions, you are in time-space. You are outside of space-time. Like in the higher dimensions, time is no longer a factor. You can, when you're in time-space, a lot of people, like say when you die, you go into the way station, a lot of people call it, where you do an assessment where you choose your next incarnation, right? You choose where you're going to be in space time. So when you're in time space, you're outside of the body. You don't have a body, you're consciousness. And when you're in that space, time is non-existent. A lot of people talk about how if you had a really traumatic death, you would have to go through a period of soul healing until you're ready for a next incarnation. Like there's that rule of, as soon as you die, you get reincarnated right away. Well, if you go into time space and go through soul healing after traumatic death, say you had, could be measured as 1,000 years of healing, having an absolute utopian environment around you, surrounded by soulmates and loved ones, and you would just simply heal. But when you go back, and after you do your assessment to go back for another reincarnation, say on Earth, and going back into space-time, you could seemingly be reincarnated like the next day, right? Because your soul healing would be outside of space-time. You're in time-space. So basically the way to separate the two of them is to say, when you're thinking of space-time, it's like reality. Is things happening now? It can only happen once, right? As we experience linear time in space. But when you think about time-space, you are, say, in source consciousness, where time is no longer a relative factor. And a lot of things happen in time-space. That's where your your spirit guides reside. It's not like people wonder, aren't our spirit guides just absolutely bored when they're with us while we're sleeping, or things like that. But from their perspective, they're not experiencing time the same way. So that's one way to look at it. And Ra also talks about, when we go to the way station and we do our assessment where we reincarnate again and decide what kind of life we're going to have and how we're going to expand, is it the same in like fourth density once you polarize negative? And it is. Obviously, those that are in these negative polarization are always trying to reincarnate and experience something that would give them more power and influence and more, more of them, just the negative polarization. So that was pretty much, I hope that helped. That's pretty much a lot of what they talked about in these next sessions. Later on in this video, I won't do a wrap up, I'll just talk about it now because it mostly has to do with, Carla and her psychic attacks, which are a constant. And the thing is, but there was something that I thought was important and good to know is that when you are unconscious, you are not open for psychic attacks the way Carla is open when she's channeling raw without enough protection, because she needed to have surgery on her hand and they were worried that she would come under psychic attack while the doctors put her under. But that is not the same as when you're channeling and letting someone use you as an instrument, because you need to have conscious intention to withdraw out of your body. Being unconscious is not your essence leaving. It actually has to be consciously done. So you can get out of body through meditation, but you're not meditating when, say, you got into a car accident and you're passed out somewhere, or you're drunk and you're passed out. You're not in a conscious state where your essence can leave your body, where someone else can come in and just take over. So there is a difference there, and they do talk about it, and it makes sense when you think about it. Like, we don't get possessed by entities every time we fall asleep at night or every time we get drunk, or just being unconscious is not the same as going into a meditative state and putting an intention on allowing us to become a vehicle for channeling, because you're very vulnerable when that happens, because you're opening a door, you're consciously opening a door. So that only happens when you put your intention into it, not when you're, putting under at the dentist office. So you don't have to ever, worry about that. So that got cleared up. I thought it was interesting. And they do talk about white magic quite a bit and how sex is used for white magic. You can really raise your vibration and consciousness and manifest quicker when you're, like, say, having sex, but it would have to be mutual sex for it to be considered white magic, when you really love someone and it's consensual. But the negative polarization would use sex in the opposite way if they, say, rape someone. And they kind of touched base a little bit on that, but they didn't dive into it. But, I like these next two sessions, and mostly it was about space-time and time-space. And I hope I cleared that up for you guys. So let's just get into it. Here is Book 3, Part 10 of The Law of One Raw Material.
The Law of One, Book 3, Session 71, September 18th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner, could you first please give me the condition of the instrument? Ra, I am Ra. It is as previously stated, with the exception of a slight improvement in the vital energy distortions. One may note to the support group, without infringement, that it is well to aid the instrument in the reminders that while physical complex distortions remain as they are, it is not advisable to use the increased vital energies for physical complex activities, as this will take a somewhat harsh toll. Questioner, in this session I hope to ask several different questions to establish a point of entry into an investigation that will be fruitful. I would first ask if it is possible to increase polarity without increasing harvestability? Ra, I am Ra. The connection between polarization and harvestability is most important in third density harvest. In this density, an increase in the serving of others or the serving of self will almost inevitably increase the ability of an entity to enjoy an higher intensity of light. Thus in this density, we may say, it is hardly possible to polarize without increasing in harvestability. Questioner, this would probably be possible in the higher densities, such as the fifth density. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. In fifth density harvest, polarization has very little to do with harvestability. Questioner, would you explain the concept of working with the unmanifested being in third density to accelerate evolution? Ra, I am Ra. This is a many-layered question, and which stria we wish to expose is questionable. Please restate giving any further depth of information requested if possible. Questioner, define, please, the unmanifested being. Ra, I am Ra. We may see that you wish to pursue the deeper strata of information. We shall, therefore, answer in a certain way which does not exhaust the query but is designed to move beneath the outer teachings somewhat. The unmanifested being is, as we have said, that being which exists and does its work without reference to or aid from other selves. To move into this concept, you may see the inevitable connection between the unmanifested self and the metaphysical, or time-space analog of the space-time self. The activities of meditation, contemplation, and what may be called the internal balancing of thoughts and reactions, are those activities of the unmanifested self more closely aligned with the metaphysical self. Questioner, as an entity goes through the death process in third density, it finds itself in time-space. It finds itself in a different set of circumstances. Would you please describe the circumstances or properties of time-space and then the process of healing of incarnative experiences that some entities encounter? Ra, I am Ra. Although this query is difficult to answer adequately, due to the limitations of your spacetime sound vibration complexes, we shall respond to the best of our ability. The hallmark of time-space is the inequity between time and space. In your spacetime, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion. In time-space, the inequity is upon the shoulders of that property known to you as time. This property renders entities and experiences intangible in a relative sense. In your framework, each particle or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what you call the speed of light, from the direction of supraluminal velocities. Thus the time-space or metaphysical experience is that which is very finely tuned and, although an analog of space-time, lacking in its tangible characteristics. In these metaphysical planes, there is a great deal of what you call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases, and learn teachings of a prior, as you would call it, space-time incarnation. The extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated, which must needs be absorbed before the process of healing of an entity may be accomplished. Each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as you are located in spacetime in a somewhat immobile state in time. In this immobile space, the entity has been placed by the formmaker and higher self so that it may be in the proper configuration for learned teaching that which it has received in the space-time incarnation. Depending upon this time-space locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. The process involves seeing in full the experience, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, forgiving the self for all missteps as regards the missed guideposts during the incarnation, and, finally, the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning. This is done entirely by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in space-time of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. Questioner, is the process in positive time-space identical with the process in negative time-space for this healing? Ra, I am Ra. The process in space-time of the forgiveness and acceptance is much like that in time-space in that the qualities of the process are analogous. However, while in space-time it is not possible to determine the course of events beyond the incarnation but only to correct present imbalances. In time-space, upon the other hand, it is not possible to correct any unbalanced actions, but rather to perceive the imbalances, and thusly forgive the self for that which is. The decisions then are made to set up the probabilities of correcting these imbalances, in what you call future space-time experiences. The advantage of time-space is that of the fluidity of the grand overview. The advantage of space-time is that, working in darkness, with a tiny candle, one may correct imbalances. Questioner, if an entity has chosen the negative polarization, are the processes of healing and review similar for the negative path? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner, are the processes that we are talking about processes that occur on many planets in our Milky Way galaxy, or do they occur on all planets, or what percentage? Ra, I am Ra. These processes occur upon all planets which have given birth to sublogoi such as yourselves. The percentage of inhabited planets is approximately 10%. Questioner: what percentage of stars, roughly, have planetary systems? Ra: I am Ra. This is unimportant information, but harmless. Approximately 32% of stars have planets as you know them, while another 6% have some sort of clustering material, which upon some densities might be inhabitable. Questioner: this would tell me that roughly 3% of all stars have inhabited planets. This process of evolution is in effect throughout the known universe then. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This octave of infinite knowledge of the one creator is as it is throughout the one infinite creation, with variations programmed by sublogoi of what you call major galaxies and minor galaxies. These variations are not significant but may be compared to various regions of geographical location sporting various ways of pronouncing the same sound vibration complex or concept. Questioner: it seems to me from this that the sublogos such as our sun uses free will to modify only slightly a much more general idea of created evolution, so that the general plan of created evolution then seems to be uniform throughout the one infinite creation. The process is for the sublogoi to grow through the densities and, under the first distortion, find their way back to the original thought. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: then each entity is of a path that leads to one destination. This is like many, many roads that travel through many, many places but eventually merge into one large center. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. This is correct, but somewhat wanting in depth of description. More applicable would be the thought that each entity contains within it all of the densities and subdensities of the octave, so that in each entity, no matter whither its choices lead it, its great internal blueprint is one with all others. Thusly its experiences will fall into the patterns of the journey back to the original logos. This is done through free will, but the materials from which choices can be made are one blueprint. Questioner: you have made the statement that pure negativity acts as a gravity well pulling all into it. I was wondering first if pure positivity has precisely the same effect? Could you answer that please? Ra: I am Ra. This is incorrect. Positivity has a much weaker effect due to the strong element of recognition of free will in any positivity approaching purity. Thus, although the negatively oriented entity may find it difficult to polarize negatively in the midst of such resounding harmony, it will not find it impossible. Upon the other hand, the negative polarization is one which does not accept the concept of the free will of other selves. Thusly, in a social complex whose negativity approaches purity, the pull upon other selves is constant. A positively oriented entity in such a situation would desire for other selves to have their free will and thusly would find itself removed from its ability to exercise its own free will, for the free will of negatively oriented entities is bent upon conquest. Questioner: could you please comment on the accuracy of these statements? I am going to talk in general about the concept of magic and first define it as the ability to create changes in consciousness at will. Is this an acceptable definition? Ra: I am Ra. This definition is acceptable in that it places upon the adept the burden it shall bear. It may be better understood by referring back to an earlier query in your measurement, within this working having to do with the unmanifested self. In magic, one is working with one's unmanifested self in body, in mind, and in spirit, the mixture depending upon the nature of the working. These workings are facilitated by the enhancement of the activation of the indigo ray energy center. The indigo ray energy center is fed, as are all energy centers, by experience, but far more than the others is fed by what we have called the disciplines of the personality. Questioner: I will state that the objective of the white magical ritual is to create a change in consciousness of a group. Is this correct? Ra: I am Ra. Not necessarily. It is possible for what you term white magic to be worked for the purpose of altering only the self or the place of working. This is done in the knowledge that to aid the self in polarization towards love and light is to aid the planetary vibration. Questioner: the change in consciousness should result in a greater distortion towards service to others, towards unity with all, and towards knowing in order to serve. Is this correct, and are there any other desired results? Ra: I am Ra. These are commendable phrases. The heart of white magic is the experience of the joy of union with the Creator. This joy will of necessity radiate throughout the life experience of the positive adept. It is for this reason that sexual magic is not restricted solely to the negatively oriented polarizing adepts, but when most carefully used has its place in high magic as it, when correctly pursued, joins body, mind, and spirit with the one infinite Creator. Any purpose which you may frame should, we suggest, take into consideration this basic union with the one infinite Creator, for this union will result in service to others of necessity. Questioner, there are, shall I say, certain rules of white magic. I will read these few and I would like you to comment on the philosophical content or basis of these and add to this list any of importance that I have neglected. First, a special place of working preferably constructed by the practitioners. Second, a special signal or key such as a ring to summon the magical personality. Third, special clothing worn only for the workings. Fourth, a specific time of day. Fifth, a series of ritual sound vibratory complexes designed to create the desired mental distortion. Sixth, a group objective for each session. Could you comment on this list, please? Ra, I am Ra. To comment upon this list is to play the mechanic which views the instruments of the orchestra and adjusts and tunes the instruments. You will note these are mechanical details. The art does not lie herein. The one item of least import is what you call the time of day. This is important in those experiential nexi wherein the entities search for the metaphysical experience, without conscious control over the search. The repetition of workings gives this search structure. In this particular group, the structure is available without the need for inevitable sameness of times of working. We may note that this regularity is always helpful. Questioner, you stated in a previous session that Ra searched for some time to find a group such as this one. I would assume that this search was for the purpose of communicating the law of one. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is partially correct. We also, as we have said, wish to attempt to make reparation for distortions of this law set in motion by our naive actions of your past. Questioner, can you tell me if we have covered the necessary material at this point to, if published, make the necessary reparations for the naive actions? Ra, I am Ra. We mean no disrespect for your service, but we do not expect to make full reparations for these distortions. We may, however, offer our thoughts in the attempt. The attempt is far more important to us than the completeness of the result. The nature of your language is such that what is distorted cannot, to our knowledge, be fully undistorted but only illuminated somewhat. In response to your desire to see the relationship betwixt space-time and time-space, may we say that we conducted this search in time-space, for in this illusion one may quite readily see entities as vibratory complexes, and groups as harmonics within vibratory complexes. Questioner, I see the most important aspect of this communication as being a vehicle of partial enlightenment for those incarnate now who have become aware of their part in their own evolutionary process. Am I correct in this assumption? Ra, I am Ra. You are correct. We may note that this is the goal of all artifacts and experiences which entities may come into contact with, and is not only the property of Ra or this contact. We find that this instrument has neglected to continue to remind itself of the need for holding some portion of energy back for reserve. This is recommended as a portion of the inner program to be reinstated, as it will lengthen the number of workings we may have. This is acceptable to us. The transferred energy grows quite low. We must leave you shortly. Is there a brief query at this time? Questioner, is there anything that we can do to improve the contact or to make the instrument more comfortable? Ra, I am Ra. You are conscientious. Remain most fastidious about the alignments of the appurtenances. We thank you. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and in the glorious light of the infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai. The Law of One, Book 3, Session 72, October 14, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. We communicate now. Questioner, could you first give me an indication of the instrument's condition? Ra, I am Ra. This instrument's physical energy distortions are as previously stated. The vital energy level has become distorted from normal levels, somewhat downward, due to the distortion in this instrument's mind complex activity that it has been responsible for the, shall we say, difficulties in achieving the appropriate configuration for this contact. Questioner. Was the banishing ritual that we performed of any effect in purifying the place of working and the screening of influences that we do not wish? Ra, I am Ra. This is quite correct. Questioner. Can you tell me what I can do to improve the effectiveness of the ritual? Ra, I am Ra. No. Questioner. Can you tell me what caused the instrument to become in a condition toward unconsciousness in the last two meditations, prior to this one to such an extent that we discontinued them? Ra, I am Ra. We can. Questioner. Would you please tell me then? Ra, I am Ra. The entity which greets this instrument from the Orion group first attempted to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was preparing for the raw contact. You are familiar with this tactic and its consequences. The instrument, with no pause, upon feeling this greeting, called for the grounding within the physical complex by requesting that the hand be held. Thus the greatest aim of the Orion entity was not achieved. However, it discovered that those present were not capable of distinguishing between unconsciousness with the mind-body-spirit intact, and the trance state in which the mind-body-spirit complex is not present. Therefore, it applied to the fullest extent the greeting which causes the dizziness and in meditation without protection caused, in this instrument, simple unconsciousness as in what you would call fainting or vertigo. The Orion entity consequently used this tactic to stop the raw contact from having the opportunity to be accomplished. Questioner. The instrument has scheduled an operation on her hand next month. If the general anesthetic is used to produce the unconscious state, will this or any other parameters of the operation allow for any inroads by the Orion entities? Ra, I am Ra. It is extremely improbable due to the necessity for the intention of the mind-body-spirit complex, when departing the yellow ray physical complex, to be serving the Creator in the most specific fashion. The attitude of one approaching such an experience as you describe would not be approaching the unconscious state with such an attitude. Questioner. We have here, I believe, a very important principle with respect to the law of one. You have stated that the attitude of the individual is of paramount importance for the Orion entity to be able to be effective. Would you please explain how this mechanism works with respect to the law of one and why the attitude of the entity is of paramount importance and why this allows for action by the Orion entity? Ra, I am Ra. The law of confusion or free will is utterly paramount in the workings of the infinite creation. That which is intended has as much intensity of attraction to the polar opposite as the intensity of the intention or desire. Thus those whose desires are shallow or transitory experience only ephemeral configurations of what might be called the magical circumstance. There is a turning point, a fulcrum which swings as a mind-body-spirit complex tunes its will to service. If this will and desire is for service duthers, the corresponding polarity will be activated. In the circumstance of this group, there are three such wills acting as one with the instrument in the, shall we say, central position of fidelity to service. This is as it must be for the balance of the working and the continuance of the contact. Our vibratory complex is one-pointed in these workings also, and our will to serve is also of some degree of purity. This has created the attraction of the polar opposite which you experience. We may note that such a configuration of free will, one-pointed in service to others, also has the potential for the alerting of a great mass of light strength. This positive light strength, however, operates also under free will and must be invoked. We could not speak to this and shall not guide you, for the nature of this contact is such that the purity of your free will must, above all things, be preserved. Thus you wend your way through experiences, discovering those biases which may be helpful. Questioner. The negatively oriented entities who contact us and others on this planet are limited by the first distortion. They have obviously been limited by the banishing ritual just performed. Could you describe, with respect to free will, how they limit themselves in order to work within the first distortion and how the banishing ritual itself works? Ra, I am Ra. This query has several portions. Firstly, those of negative polarity do not operate with respect to free will unless it is necessary. They call themselves and will infringe whenever they feel it possible. Secondly, they are limited by the great law of confusion in that, for the most part, they are unable to enter this planetary sphere of influence and are able to use the windows of time-space distortion, only insofar as there is some calling to balance the positive calling. Once they are here, their desire is conquest. Thirdly, in the instance of this instrument's being removed permanently from this space-time, it is necessary to allow the instrument to leave its yellow-ray physical complex of its free will. Thus trickery has been attempted. The use of the light forms being generated is such as to cause such entities to discover a wall through which they cannot pass. This is due to the energy complexes of the light beings and aspects of the one infinite creator invoked and evoked in the building of the wall of light. Questioner, everything that we experience with respect to this contact, our distortion toward knowledge in order to serve, the Orion entity's distortion towards reducing the effectiveness of this contact. All of this is a result of the first distortion, as I see it. In creating the totally free atmosphere for the creator to become more knowledgeable of itself through the interplay of its portions, one with respect to the other. Is my view correct with respect to what I have just said? Ra, I am Ra. Yes. Questioner, in the last session you mentioned that if the instrument used any of the increased vital energy that she experiences for physical activity that she would pay a harsh toll. Could you tell me the nature of that harsh toll and why it would be experienced? Ra, I am Ra. The physical energy level is a measure of the amount of available energy of the body complex of a mind-body-spirit complex. The vital energy measurement is one which expresses the amount of energy of being of the mind-body-spirit complex. This entity has great distortions in the direction of mind complex activity, spirit complex activity, and that great conduit to the creator, the will. Therefore, this instrument's vital energy, even in the absence of any physical reserve measurable, is quite substantial. However, the use of this energy of will, mind, and spirit for the things of the physical complex causes a far greater distortion in the lessening of the vital energy than would the use of this energy for those things which are in the deepest desires and will of the mind-body-spirit complex. In this entity, these desires are for service to the creator. This entity sees all service as service to the creator, and this is why we have cautioned the support group and the instrument itself. In this regard, all services are not equal in depth of distortion. The overuse of this vital energy is, to be literal, the rapid removal of life force. Questioner, you mentioned that the large amount of light that is available. Could this group, by proper ritual, use this for recharging the vital energy of the instrument? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. However, we caution against any working which raises up any personality, rather it is well to be fastidious in your working. Questioner, could you explain what you mean by raises up any personality? Ra, I am Ra. Clues, we may offer. Explanation is infringement. We can only ask that you realize that all are one. Questioner, we have included a shin in the banishing ritual, Yod He Vav He, to make it Yod He Shin Vav He. Is this helpful? Ra, I am Ra. This is helpful especially to the instrument whose distortions vibrate greatly in congruency with this sound vibration complex. Questioner, we will in the future have group meditations. I am concerned about protection for the instrument if she is once more a channel in these meditations. Is there an optimum time or limiting amount of time for the banishing ritual to be effective, or if we continued daily to purify the place of working with the banishing ritual, would this carry over for long periods of time, or must the ritual be done immediately prior to the meditations? Ra, I am Ra. Your former assumption is more nearly correct. Questioner, is there any danger now, with the precautions that we are taking, of the instrument being led away by the Orion entity? Ra, I am Ra. The opportunities for the Orion entity are completely dependent upon the instrument's condition of awareness and readiness. We would suggest that this instrument is still too much the neophyte to open itself to questions, since that is the format used by Ra. As the instrument grows in awareness, this precaution may become unnecessary. Questioner, why is there no protection at the floor or bottom of the banishing ritual, and should there be? Ra, I am Ra. This will be the last full query of this working. The development of the psychic greeting is possible only through the energy centers, starting from a station which you might call within the violet ray, moving through the adept's energy center and therefrom, towards the target of opportunity. Depending upon the vibratory nature and purpose of greeting, be it positive or negative, the entity will be energized or blocked in the desired way. We of Ra approach this instrument in narrow band contact through violet ray. Others might pierce down through this ray to any energy center. We, for instance, make great use of this instrument's Blu-ray energy center as we are attempting to communicate our distortion understandings of the law of one. The entity of Orion pierces the same violet ray and moves to two places to attempt most of its non-physical opportunities. It activates the green ray energy center while further blocking indigo ray energy center. This combination causes confusion in the instrument and subsequent overactivity in unwise proportions in physical complex workings. It simply seeks out the distortions pre-incarnatively programmed and developed in incarnative state. The energies of life itself, being the one infinite creator, flow from the south pole of the body seen in its magnetic form. Thus only the creator may, through the feet, enter the energy shell of the body to any effect. The effects of the adept are those from the upper direction, and thus the building of the wall of light is quite propitious. May we ask if there are any shorter queries at this time? Questioner: I would just ask if there is anything that we could do to make the instrument more comfortable or to improve the contact. Ra, I am Ra. This instrument has some increased distortion in the region of the neck. Some attention here might provide greater comfort. All is well, my friends. The forbearance and patience observed by Ra are commendable. Continue in this fastidiousness of purpose and care for the appropriate configurations for contact, and our continuance of contact will continue to be possible. This is acceptable to us. I am Ra. I leave you, my friends, glorying in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, then, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.